Her hand didn't shake. Her voice didn't rise. She walked over, looked me dead in the eyes, and threw the hot coffee at me. Scalding, sharp, sudden. I gasped. I stood. The mug slipped from my hand and shattered on the tile. The pain came a second later, the sting across my thighs. But what hurt more, what truly burned, was her face. Flat. Unmoved. She didn't even blink. She looked down at me like I was just a spill she couldn't be bothered to clean. Like I wasn't her mother, just mess on her floor. Travis didn't look up, just kept eating cereal. The spoon clinked in rhythm like nothing had happened. Her husband stood in the hallway watching, silent. And then, he turned away. If you've ever raised a child who later called you inconvenient, if you've ever sat in a kitchen you paid for only to be told you no longer belonged, then you'll understand what happened that morning. It began long before the coffee, but that was the first time I realized I wasn't their mother. I was their ATM. And now the balance had changed. Let me tell you how we got there. Before we continue, please like and subscribe to the channel, and let us know where you're listening from. This story might hit closer than you think. There was a time Lisa used to call me Mama. A time she'd crawl into my bed after a bad dream, clutching her favorite stuffed fox, whispering, "Don't leave." I didn't. Not when her father died. Not when we lost the house. Not even when I had my first fall, and everything became harder. I held on, because that's what mothers do. But the thing about holding on too long is, people start mistaking your love for obligation. An obligation, when stretched far enough, becomes resentment. Lisa resented me now. She resented the space I took up in her spotless house, the groceries I liked that didn't match her meal plan, the classical music I played softly in the afternoons, and the faint smell of arthritis balm in the hallway. She resented everything. But most of all, she resented that I still had a bank account. "It's just $5,000, Grandma," Travis had said, "for a gaming setup. No apology, no hesitation. Like I was a living debit card with feet. And when I said no, that's when Lisa threw the coffee. I'd expected anger. I'd expected coldness. But not that. Not violence. Not from my own daughter. She didn't even ask if I was hurt. Instead, she looked at me, wet, burned, breathless, and delivered the ultimatum: either you pay or you leave. And the worst part, Travis just kept eating, never even looked up from his phone. I stood there for a long time. Time enough for the burn to bloom and for the betrayal to crystallize. Then I turned, walked to my room, closed the door. And I didn't cry, not because it didn't hurt, but because something inside me had gone very, very still. The kind of still that comes before a storm. I looked down at the coffee on the floor, still steaming. One of the broken shards of ceramic had landed near my foot. It had a tiny painted rose on it, a piece of something once beautiful, like me. I didn't argue, didn't cry. I simply turned slowly and walked to the sink. The cold water stung my skin, but I didn't wince. I rinsed my hands, dried them on a paper towel, and turned off the tap. Then I said, "I'll be gone before sunset." Lisa blinked. I think she expected resistance, a plea, maybe a tearful apology. She didn't know what it meant for a woman like me to be quiet. But she would learn, because quiet doesn't mean weak. It means final. I left the kitchen without a word. No one followed. No one asked if I was okay. Not Travis, not Lisa, not even the echo of who they used to be. Back in the guest room, my room, I sat on the edge of the bed she used to help me into back when I still believed her concern was unconditional. She called it a temporary arrangement, said it with warmth like a gift, and I was grateful. God help me, I was so grateful. But now I saw it clearly. It wasn't hospitality, it was a trap. I looked around the room, my prison. The air smelled like lavender, but there was no peace here. Just the scent of a cage dressed as comfort. I stood and opened the closet. The suitcase I'd kept tucked up high was still there, dusty, old, but intact. I pulled it down with both hands, bracing myself against the dresser for balance. My hips screamed. My heart did not. I began to pack, not with panic, not with rage, but with the steady grace of someone reclaiming their name. I folded shirts, placed undergarments with care, wrapped the few pieces of jewelry I still owned, costume mostly, and one pearl ring from Cliff, my late husband. A ring I hadn't worn in months, but it was mine, and I would wear it again. The house was silent except for the TV humming in the living room. Lisa's favorite show, the one about flipping houses. She liked the transformation when it didn't involve her. And Travis likely, back in his room, spending someone else's money, still expecting mine. I sat back down, the suitcase at my feet. My hands are resting in my lap now, red and raw from the burn. No one came. No one checked. Even after the shouting. Even after the crash. And that silence, that told me everything. They didn't think I'd leave. They didn't believe I could. They thought they'd broken me. But all they'd done was wake me up. I reached into the top drawer and pulled out the envelope I'd tucked beneath the spare linens months ago, my birth certificate, insurance cards, and a printed routing number from my bank. At the time, I didn't know why I'd hidden it. Now I did. Because some part of me always knew this day would come. I didn't sob. I didn't scream. I packed. I planned. And by sunset, they would no longer be able to say they kept me. Because I would no longer be theirs to keep. You don't realize how many things you've stopped doing until you're free to do them again. Like breathing fully, or zipping a suitcase without shame, or looking in a mirror and seeing your own eyes, not someone else's version of who you should be. I sat on the edge of the bed for a while, listening to the sounds of a house that no longer felt like mine. The low hum of the dryer, a voice on the television narrating kitchen renovations, the occasional footsteps of Lisa's slippers tapping down the hallway, stopping short of my door. She didn't knock. She didn't ask if I was okay. Maybe she assumed I was too old to actually leave. Or maybe she didn't care if I did. I moved slowly, not because I was fragile, but because I wanted to remember this. Every fold of fabric, every careful zip, every item I chose to take with me. This wasn't running away. This was exiting the stage after the final curtain with my head held high. I reached under the bed for my purse only to feel that flutter of panic when your hand comes back empty. It was there yesterday. I was sure of it. I used it at the pharmacy. I had to. I stood ignoring the ache in my joints and began searching. Top drawer, nothing. Bottom drawer, no wallet, no card. The side pockets of my suitcase, the lining of my coat, gone. I moved faster now, more frantic. That sick metallic taste is blooming in my mouth. My pulse pounded. Finally, I dumped my purse onto the bed. Peppermints, tissues, an old lipstick. But no wallet, no ID, no bank card. They were gone. And with them, so was the last illusion I'd been holding on to. Lisa hadn't just poured coffee in my lap. She'd taken my autonomy months ago, and I hadn't even noticed. I sat down, hands shaking, and replayed yesterday at the pharmacy. Lisa had driven me. I was slow on my feet. She'd offered to carry my bag while I walked. I thought she was being kind. But kindness doesn't steal. I could hear her voice in my head now from back when this all started. Let me just take care of your bills, Mom. It's easier. You need to focus on healing. I let her. I let her help. She helped herself to my identity. She helped herself to every part of my life that wasn't locked away. And I had handed it to her, one login at a time. I stood and opened the dresser's second drawer. In the back was a small notepad, yellowed spiral bound, the kind I used to write grocery lists in. On the last page in my shaky handwriting were my account numbers, routing information, the name of my bank rep from before Lisa changed everything to paperless. She called it simplifying. No, it was erasing. I stared at those numbers. Familiar, still mine, but distant like a photograph of a home you no longer live in. I clutched the notebook to my chest, sat back on the bed and exhaled slow, steady, bitter. They hadn't just asked for money, they'd taken it, piece by piece, under the banner of caregiving. Lisa hadn't locked the doors. She'd made the world outside so inaccessible that I stopped trying to reach it. She hadn't shouted at me, she'd drowned me in convenience. She hadn't hit me, she'd hollowed me. That's what financial abuse looks like when it's committed with a smile and a latte. And the worst part, I let her. Because I was tired. Because I wanted to believe that someone could love me without calculating the return. But now I was wide awake. I placed the notebook in my suitcase carefully along with the envelope of documents. I couldn't access the accounts without my cards, but I still had names, numbers, the truth. And the truth, as I was beginning to learn, is more powerful than guilt. From the hallway, I heard Travis laughing. I wondered what it was like to grow up with the belief that money just appeared, that elders existed to fund your lifestyle, that your grandmother was just another line item in the household spreadsheet. But I wouldn't wonder for long, because today, I was leaving. I picked up my phone and scrolled to a contact I hadn't used in over a year. Gerald M. Neighbor. Friend, retired attorney, quiet man with kind eyes, and a navy windbreaker he wore in every season. He used to bring over lemons from his tree before Cliff passed. We hadn't spoken much since I moved in with Lisa, because Lisa didn't like him. She said he asked too many questions. I pressed call. He picked up on the second ring. Ruth. His voice hadn't changed. Everything all right? I swallowed hard. No, I said. But it will be. There was a pause on his end, just long enough to make room for trust. I'm 10 minutes away, he said. I'll bring the Subaru. I hung up and stared at the phone in my lap. No shaking. No second guessing. Just resolve. The silence in the house was louder now. No footsteps. No questions. They were pretending I didn't mean it. But I did. And when someone like me means something, means it from the bone, it's already done. I zipped my suitcase, walked to the closet and pulled out my old coat. The lining was frayed, the color had faded. But it was mine. Mine like the years I gave, like the love I poured, like the money they didn't earn. I stood by the door for a full minute listening. No one came. I turned the handle, stepped out, and walked past the living room. Lisa didn't even look up. She was sipping coffee again. A fresh mug. Travis had headphones on. I walked past them like a ghost they never thought would leave. But I wasn't a ghost. I was a storm they never saw coming. At the end of the driveway, Gerald's car pulled in slowly. He stepped out, no questions, just that calm sense of presence he always carried. Careful with your hip, he said, lifting the suitcase like it weighed nothing. That one line, that simple kindness, almost broke me, because I realized how long it had been since someone was gentle without conditions. Everything you need, he asked. I nodded. Everything I still own. He opened the passenger door. I climbed in, closed it, and the house disappeared behind me like a closing chapter. By the time we were halfway down the street, the adrenaline started to wear off. My legs ached, my hands felt hollow, but my mind, it was clear. Thank you, I said, voice low. Gerald just nodded. You don't owe me anything, but I did. I owed him the truth. I think she stole my bank cards. He didn't react, didn't gasp, just kept his eyes on the road. We'll figure it out, he said. You're not the first. I stared out the window, watching the rows of houses blur into motion. The world looked different from the passenger seat, like I was seeing it again for the first time. I don't have cash, I added. Nothing really. I gave her access. Passwords. Autopay. She said it was temporary. Gerald sighed, but gently. That's what they all say. And then it becomes permanent by design. We didn't talk much after that. Sometimes silence is the most sacred space. At a red light, he reached into the glove box and handed me a slim folder. Inside were pamphlets. A senior living community. Golden Pines. The one with the koi pond and the shaded courtyard. I thought you might like to see this, he said. Just to look. No pressure. I didn't open it right away. Instead, I said, Lisa told me it was too expensive. Gerald didn't laugh. He just replied, Lisa said a lot of things, Ruth. And he was right. She said she loved me. She said she'd help. She said I was lucky. But what she never said, never once, was thank you. That told me everything. We pulled into the parking lot of Golden Pines an hour later. The sign was modest. The building is warm, not flashy, not sterile, just human. The kind of place where people weren't managed. They were seen. And as I stepped out of the car, I realized something. This wasn't an escape. This was a return to myself, to a woman who didn't need permission to breathe. The front lobby of Golden Pines didn't smell like disinfectant. It smelled like lemon balm and fresh-baked rolls, and something I hadn't smelled in a long time, welcome. A young woman named Leia greeted us, not with pity, not with the sing-song voice people use around the elderly, just warmth, simple and clean. "Hi, Ruth," Gerald called. "We've got a tour ready if you're up for it." Up for it. No one had asked me that in months. Not, "Can you manage or do you need help?" Just, "Are you up for it?" I nodded and we began walking. Gerald stayed beside me, matching my pace. He didn't rush, he didn't steer, he let me lead. We passed through sunlit hallways and open common spaces, with high ceilings and wide windows. Not a curtain in sight. The light was allowed to flood in. The courtyard was blooming camellias and daisies, and that koi pond I remembered from the brochure years ago. The fish glided beneath the surface like they had nowhere urgent to be. "Can I sit for a minute?" I asked. Laya smiled. "Take your time. This is your visit." I sat on a wooden bench beside the pond. Gerald stood quietly nearby, hands folded in front of him. I watched the koi swim slow loops beneath the reeds. "This," I whispered, "feels like life." Gerald nodded. "It is." We sat for several minutes. I don't know how many. Time didn't matter here. When we made our way back inside, Laya led us to the tea room. She brought over 2 cups and a small plate of lemon cookies. No pitch, no sales talk, just tea. I wrapped my hands around the mug and let the warmth soak into my fingers. My palms still carried faint pink marks from the coffee Lisa had poured on me 2 days earlier. She'd never even asked if I needed ice. I stared at the steam rising from my cup. "How do people afford this?" I asked softly. "Places like this," Gerald didn't answer right away. Then he reached into his satchel and handed me a single document. It wasn't a brochure. It was a protective trust application. "First step," he said. "If Lisa's been siphoning your accounts and blocking access, we have grounds for financial protection. Once that's filed, we lock everything. Reassign authority, pull all records. It's discreet but effective." I blinked. I thought this only happened to people who didn't pay attention. "It happens to people who love," he said gently. "And to people who are too tired to fight." That silenced me. Because he was right. I hadn't been blind. I'd been grateful. And gratitude is the perfect disguise for theft when it's served with just enough control. I sipped my tea. It was floral, calming. The kind of thing I used to drink when I had my own home, my own morning routine, a window herb garden, Cliff's jacket still hanging by the door. Now that entire life felt like a dream I'd convinced myself was someone else's. "Can we file today?" I asked. Gerald nodded. "We'll go to my place. I've got a printer scanner notary connection. We'll build the file together." I looked out the window at the koi pond once more. One fish flicked its tail and disappeared beneath a lily pad. I never realized I said how much of myself I'd handed over, just because I didn't want to cause trouble. "You didn't hand it over," Gerald said. "She took it." I felt a tear escape, just one. I wiped it away quickly. But Gerald saw. He didn't comment. He just poured more tea into my cup and let the silence settle. That night, I sat at his kitchen table surrounded by legal pads, documents, and a notepad of my own, the same one from the drawer. I had written down every moment that had felt off in Lisa's house. The pharmacy trips where she paid even though I had the cash. The Amazon packages that arrived but weren't for me. The conversations I'd never had with my bank but which Lisa insisted had gone smoothly. My handwriting was messy. Some lines trailed off, but the truth was there underlined and raw. Gerald flipped through the first few pages, his eyes scanning with quiet precision. Recurring charges at designer clothing stores, he murmured. Withdrawals at 3 a.m. PayPal transfers. Wow. You kept track of all this. I thought maybe I was imagining it, I said, or being paranoid. She told me I was confused. He set the papers down. You weren't confused. You were being gaslit. The word hit me like a gust of wind. I'd heard it before on TV and stories. I never thought it would apply to me. I was an ER nurse for 30 years. I'd helped trauma victims find their breath. I'd held hands through pain that most people would turn away from. But I hadn't been able to see my own daughter's strategy unfolding in slow, smiling increments. Until now. Do you want to call her? Gerald asked. No. Do you want to tell her you're filing? No, I said again. Let the paperwork speak. He smiled faintly. Good. It always speaks louder than we think. We scanned documents well past midnight. Every file, every bank line, every medical bill Lisa said she paid out of pocket, but charged to my account. And somewhere around the 15th page, something inside me shifted. This wasn't just about reclaiming money, it was about reclaiming my name. The one Lisa had used to get approvals, the one she'd signed on forms, the one she whispered like ownership when she said, "You're lucky to have me." By the time we finished, I was exhausted. But I didn't feel weak. I felt clean. As I stood to leave, Gerald handed me one last envelope. What's this? It's an idea. I opened it the next morning. Inside was a document for transferring property into an irrevocable living trust. My house. The one Lisa lived in. The one I still legally owned, though she'd stopped asking permission to repaint, redecorate, or renovate. She had changed the locks, changed the curtains, changed the rhythm, but she never changed the title. That was still in my name, because Cliff had left it to me, and because I had never not once signed away power of attorney. She didn't think I needed to, because I was old. She assumed that age meant ignorance, but age just meant I had patience. And now it was her turn to learn what happens when the person you underestimated decides to stop explaining themselves. Gerald looked at me across the breakfast table. We can finalize the trust tomorrow, he said. Once it's done, Lisa's claim is gone, legally, financially, ethically. You'll own the house and everything she thought was hers. She's going to be furious, I said. She's going to be powerless, he corrected. We filed the paperwork the next day. It was fast, precise, silent, just like me. Lisa didn't know I'd left the house for good. Not yet. She thought I was sulking, nursing hurt feelings. She didn't know I was meeting with a financial abuse specialist who would soon flag every transaction tied to my bank account for the last 6 months. She didn't know I'd submitted a report to the Elder Fraud Division. And she certainly didn't know that a real estate agent named Carla would be standing in her front yard the following morning with a clipboard and an appraiser's eye. That call came from me, referred by Gerald, confidential, ethical, discreet, just the way I wanted it. Lisa wouldn't see me, but she'd see the consequences, because I didn't raise my voice. I raised the paper trail. And the difference paper doesn't forget. The knock came at 10:42 a.m., not on my door, on hers. Lisa had just stepped out of the shower. I imagine her mornings were ritualistic, always timed, always curated. She wore control like perfume. But control has a scent too, and that day it smelled like panic. The doorbell rang a second time. Outside, Carla stood holding her clipboard like a gavel. Neutral pantsuit, firm posture, calm eyes. Real estate agents like Carla don't raise their voices. They just raise property values. Lisa answered, no doubt expecting a delivery or a neighbor. Instead, she met someone who had the power to rearrange her reality. I wasn't there. I was 3 towns over, sitting on the shaded balcony of my temporary apartment at Golden Pines. Gerald had brought me a glass of iced tea and a packet of ginger biscuits. I hadn't opened them yet. Because I was waiting for the storm to begin, I didn't have to watch it. I just needed to know that for the first time I wasn't the one cleaning up the pieces. The call came 5 minutes later. Lisa. 3 missed calls, then a fourth. I answered. Mom, she spat before I could speak. What the hell is going on? There's a realtor here. She's walking through my house. Your house, whatever. She said you ordered an evaluation. I waited one full beat, then answered calm and simple. Correct. The silence on the line was thick. I could almost hear her calculating, but not fast enough. You're not serious, she said finally, voice strained. I'm very serious, I replied. You don't even live here anymore. What is this, some kind of guilt trip? Are you trying to embarrass me? I looked out at the koi pond beyond the balcony. One fish broke the surface and vanished again. No, I said. I'm just reclaiming what was always mine, she snapped. This is my home. No, I repeated, cool and absolute. It's the home you've been squatting in, managing with money that wasn't yours. I let you play caretaker. That role is now revoked. Her voice dropped into that low, venomous tone she reserved for control. You can't just throw us out. I didn't throw anyone, I said. You told me to leave. The silence after that was like snowfall, cold and suffocating. She had no idea I remembered everything. How she'd transferred the deed into my name to help with hospital paperwork. How she'd reassured me that it was easier this way, just a formality. How I'd trusted her blindly, stupidly. But there was one thing I never gave her: power of attorney. She never thought she'd need it, because she thought she had me. Now all she had was the echo of a door she'd never imagined would close. You're being cruel, Lisa hissed. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't explain. I didn't beg. Instead, I gave her the one sentence that silenced her completely. You only miss me now that I said no. Then I ended the call. No goodbye, no loophole, just silence. 30 minutes later, Carla texted evaluation completed. Client Lisa attempted to interfere. I remained professional. Strong resale potential. Will follow up tomorrow. I read it twice. Smiled once and slipped my phone into my robe pocket. Gerald called that evening. She tried to call me, he said. Left a voicemail full of threats. Let her threaten, I replied. For once I'm not afraid of her anger. And I wasn't. Because anger requires fuel. And she was running on empty now. She thought guilt was a currency. But I had gone bankrupt in that department. Now I was dealing in facts, paperwork, trusts, title deeds, proof, and the kind of silence you can't manipulate, the kind that comes with freedom. That night, I slept with the window open. The breeze carried in the scent of pine and something sweeter. Not forgiveness, not yet, but certainty. The next morning, the front desk at Golden Pines called my room. Mrs. Langley, the receptionist, said gently, You have a visitor, Elisa Andrews. Would you like her brought in? I looked at the cup of chamomile cooling in my hands. No, I said. But you can let her know I'm watching. I stood and walked slowly, steadily to the sunroom that faced the main lobby. The windows were tinted. You could see out, but they couldn't see in. It was perfect. Lisa stood in the foyer, arms crossed, pacing in tight circles, like a lioness that had just found out the zoo had changed its locks. She looked good, well-dressed, lipstick precise. But her body language gave her away. Not grief, not remorse, desperation. The kind that comes not from love, but from losing access. I watched her point toward the back, gesture toward the ceiling, even motion at the receptionist, as if the very air had offended her. She didn't know I was behind the glass. She didn't know that for the first time she was on the outside, and that was the lesson. It's not always about taking revenge. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do, it is not open the door. 10 minutes later, security arrived, not in a rush, not loud, just calm and professional. A woman in a navy blazer approached Lisa and spoke in a tone that left no room for debate. Lisa gestured wildly. She pointed again, this time directly at the brochure stand, at the ceiling, at nothing. She refused to look inward. Eventually, she turned on her heel and left. The glass doors closed behind her with a soft, final click, like punctuation, like a period at the end of a long, manipulative sentence. I walked back to my seat, picked up my tea. Cold. But I wasn't. Later that afternoon, Gerald stopped by with a bag of scones and a single white rose from his garden. "She came, didn't she?" he asked, settling into the chair beside me. "She did," I said. "She saw the building, the rules, the glass, and she realized none of it bent for her." Gerald chuckled softly. "And you didn't go out there?" I shook my head. "She doesn't get that part of me anymore." "What part?" "The part that explains myself." We sat in silence for a while. Then I added, "Do you think she'll try again?" "She will," he said, "but she'll find the locks have changed." That night I pulled out a notebook and wrote one sentence. "When they came with fury, I stayed with peace. That's how you know it's over." I tore the page out and placed it in a small frame on the nightstand, right beside the photo of Cliff and me on our 40th anniversary. He always said my silence was the loudest part of me. Now I understand what he meant. It arrived 2 days later. A cream-colored envelope, hand-addressed no return label. Lisa's handwriting. Cursive. Elegant. Too slanted. Like someone trying too hard to appear gentle. I didn't open it right away. I laid it flat on the small desk in my room. Let the sun hit the corner. Marjorie, one of the other residents, saw me holding it in the hallway. From her, she asked softly. I nodded. "Want me to open it?" "No," I said. "I don't need anyone else to see the lie." She smiled. Not out of cruelty, but recognition. We've all had letters like that. Apologies dressed as bait. I opened it at sunset. The first word, Mom. Not dear Mom, just Mom. Like she still had the right. The first paragraph was predictable. A vague apology. Words like misunderstanding and too fast. She said she never meant to hurt me, but she never said she was wrong. Then came the real reason for the letter: Travis didn't get the car loan. "We're behind on bills. If there's any way you could—" And there it was. The ask. The real sentence is beneath all the frosting. It wasn't an apology. It was positioning. The way she always did. In soft fonts. In lowercase shame. I turned the page and found something tucked inside. A personal check, drawn from one of the joint accounts she'd created just to make things easier. My name was printed in the corner, but the signature wasn't mine. I stared at it for a long time. Then I folded the check. Once. Twice. Again. Until it vanished in my palm. Then I walked it straight to the shredder in the front office. Not a word, not a flinch, just paper turning into dust. Later that evening, Gerald stopped by with lemon cake. He saw the empty envelope on my desk. "She tried again?" he asked. I handed him the check stub. He read it. Let out a low whistle. "Still thinks you're a mark." "Not anymore," I said. That night I didn't journal, because the sentence was already written in my mind. I don't care what you meant. What you did was enough. The call came at 6:17 a.m. I was already awake, seated by the window with a cup of hot water steeping quietly beside me. The koi pond below shimmered under a gauzy sunrise, its ripples soft and slow like breath after grief. Gerald's voice was calm, but there was an edge behind it I hadn't heard before. "Ruth," he said, "your trust just flagged another transaction. A forged check. Same account, same signature." I didn't even blink. "I know," I replied. There was a pause. "She sent me one last week. You didn't cash it, I shredded it." He let out a slow exhale. "Well, now the bank knows too." What Lisa didn't know or refused to believe was that I hadn't just walked away. I'd set a perimeter. With every notarized document, every flagged statement, every journal entry is dated and filed. I wasn't just escaping, I was exposed. Gerald explained the rest over breakfast. The financial abuse specialist he'd connected me with had submitted a formal report to the Elder Protection Unit. The evidence was tight forged checks, unauthorized transactions, and manipulated access points. Even an email Lisa had sent to my old banker pretending to be me. She'd used her IP address, signed off using phrases I'd never write, and even left a voicemail, her voice clear as day, asking about my balance as her daughter with full permission. There was no such permission. Now there was no more doubt either. "They're opening an investigation," Gerald said. "It's active. She may not know yet, but the net is closing." I sipped my tea and nodded. Not triumphant, just awake. "Do you want to press charges?" he asked. "I want the law to decide," I said. "I've already judged her." He looked at me for a long time, then nodded. Then we let it play. 2 days later, 2 plainclothes officers showed up at Golden Pines. Not for Lisa. For me. A quiet interview. Respectful. Patient. The younger one took notes while the older asked questions. "Can you walk us through the timeline of access? Were there any previous verbal threats? Did anyone in the household ever interfere with your mail or phone?" Yes. Yes. And yes. I handed them everything. Not photocopies. Originals and duplicates. Pages with my handwriting dated, detailed, documented. My journal entries. The trust papers. The financial statements Gerald had printed and annotated. The younger officer paused at page 4 of the banking history. "You weren't just being taken advantage of," he said. "You were being harvested." I didn't cry, because I already knew. The question wasn't if it was abuse. The question was whether I would survive it with my name intact. Now I knew the answer. Later that day, I went back to my room and opened the keepsake box at the bottom of my dresser. It was cedar. Cliff had given it to me the year before he passed. Said it was for memories I wasn't ready to throw away. Inside, beneath a yellowing receipt for our last road trip and a dried magnolia petal from our old front yard, was a plain white envelope. I hadn't opened it. The front read in his handwriting, "Only when you're tired of pretending you're okay." I opened it slowly, hands trembling, heart steady. Inside was a short letter written in his clean square cursive. "Ruth, if they ever make you feel smaller than the woman I married, don't argue. Don't explain, just leave. You don't owe anyone the right to dim your light. Use what's yours and make damn sure they can't take it again. C.P.S. I left something you'll need." Folded behind the letter was a personal check. Uncashed. $10,000. Dated just before his final surgery. My knees gave out, but the chair caught me. He knew. He had known. Even then. That someday I might need a parachute out of someone else's storm. I called Gerald. "You busy?" I asked. "For you, never." "Then let's sell a house," I said, "and open a trust they can't touch." He paused. "You ready for the fallout?" I looked at the sunlight streaming through the curtains, the scarf on the chair, the tea cooling beside my photo frame. "Yes," I said. "Because this time I'm not reacting. I'm reclaiming." That afternoon we finalized the documents. Carla, the real estate agent, arranged a private appraisal for the home. She was discreet, professional, not the kind of woman Lisa could intimidate with tone or volume. We prepared every detail. The title was legally transferred into the Ruth Langley Irrevocable Living Trust. The utility accounts were locked out from external changes. The joint bank accounts were frozen and flagged. And a restraining clause was added. Lisa was no longer legally authorized to access, manage, or represent any financial or property records tied to my name. That included the house she lived in. The one she thought was hers. The one she remodeled, decorated, and bragged about. But she never owned the bones. Never paid the taxes. Never touched the foundation. That was always mine. Now it was protected by law, by trust, by a team of people who saw through the false smiles. Gerald slid the final signature page toward me. Initial here, full name here, and date. I wrote each letter carefully. My hand was steady now. Cliff would have teased me for sticking out my tongue when I concentrate, I said with a laugh. Gerald smiled. He'd also be proud you stuck to your name. Lisa didn't find out right away, but the paperwork moved faster than her pride. By the time she saw the letter from the legal trust advisor, stamped, certified, and mailed directly to her residence, it was already done. I wasn't there to hear her scream. But I didn't need to. The silence was loud enough. Later that week, Gerald and I sat on the back patio under a navy blue sky. He poured us both a glass of wine, the good kind with a cork. She underestimated you every step of the way, he said. I underestimated myself too, I replied. We clinked glasses. To recalculating, he said. I smiled. I'm safe now, I said aloud, not to convince anyone, but because it was finally true. Not just safe from Lisa. Safe from ever needing to explain myself to people who thought kindness was a currency to be drained. That night I slept with the window open again. And the wind didn't sound like a warning anymore. It sounded like applause. Lisa always believed that silence was surrender, that my quiet meant confusion, that my stillness meant I was stuck. She mistook composure for helplessness. So when the letter arrived, crisp, legal, unemotional, it wasn't just a surprise. It was an extinction event. The envelope bore the insignia of the Langley Trust's legal counsel. It was addressed to her, not me. Because I no longer needed to speak. I had attorneys, trustees, a wall of notarized paper between me and the chaos she built. Inside a single-page notice. No threats, no apologies, no emotion, just facts. Effective immediately, Lisa Andrews is no longer authorized to access any accounts, property, or financial records belonging to Ruth Langley. All prior verbal or informal permissions are now void. Further attempts to misrepresent or falsify legal authority will result in full prosecution. That was it. No signature from me, no mom, no tearful plea, just consequences. The kind she couldn't manipulate with tone or lipstick or crocodile tears. She called me that afternoon. 7 times in a row. I didn't pick up. The 8th time she left a voicemail. Mom, this is ridiculous. You're listening to him instead of your daughter. Do you even understand what you're doing? You're throwing away your family. Family. She said it like armor, as if the word family should shield her from everything she'd done. The guilt, the control, the gaslighting. But family isn't a force field. It's not unconditional immunity. It's earned. And she had lost it the moment she poured boiling coffee in my lap and called me selfish. I forwarded the voicemail to Gerald. In case she escalates, I typed. But I wasn't afraid. I was done being afraid of people who thought love meant obedience. That evening I made tea in my chipped blue mug. The one Lisa once tried to throw out, saying it looked cheap. It was mine. And I liked it. The edges were worn from use. The handle is slightly crooked from time. Kind of like me. I sat by the window as the sun dipped below the koi pond and wrote something in my notebook. She used to believe that if I stayed quiet, I would stay hers. But silence can also be a decision. A door. A boundary she never saw coming. I didn't mail anything in return. Didn't reply. Didn't scold. I let the letter stand alone, quiet and undefeated. And the absence of my voice. That was the loudest thing I'd ever said. The next morning, a white envelope appeared under my door at Golden Pines. Hand-addressed. No stamp. Lisa. She had come here again. The handwriting was still hers, looping and controlled. A practiced elegance like everything she performed. But this time I didn't freeze. I didn't feel dread. I felt clarity. I picked up the envelope, walked it downstairs, and fed it into the shredder by the front desk without opening it. The staff didn't ask. They'd seen it before. Children who return not out of love, but loss. Not because they miss you, but because you locked the vault. Later that afternoon, Gerald arrived with a small bundle of documents for me to review. He spread them out on the table in the tea room, updated trust protocols, protective account clauses, backup emergency contacts. Each form had a clean line for my signature. One by one, I signed them. Ownership, control, boundaries, freedom. They don't come all at once. They come line by line, clause by clause, until your life no longer needs defending, because it's protected. When I finished signing, Gerald tapped his pen once on the folder. You know, he said, you've done something most people never get to do. What's that? I asked. You ended the cycle. He folded the documents. Not with a bang, not with a scream, just with a locked door and a clean name. That Friday afternoon, something changed. The air outside had shifted warmer, heavier, like a storm was circling from a distance. I sat on the bench near the koi pond, hands folded over my scarf when I saw them. Lisa and Travis. They were walking up the path toward the Golden Pines entrance. Lisa's steps were sharp, her shoulders tight. Travis lagged hoodie up, mouth tight with entitlement. I didn't move. I didn't even shift my weight. I simply watched, like a woman observing the aftershock from a higher hill. Doris, the front desk attendant, saw them first. She stepped out from behind the desk and blocked the entry posture, firm arms at her side. Lisa gestured wildly, pointed toward the rear gardens, toward me. But Doris didn't move. She had the list. Only approved guests are allowed. No walk-ins, no confrontations, no exceptions. From my vantage, I could see Lisa's lips moving. I couldn't hear the words, but I knew the shapes. Let me in. I just want to talk. She's my mother. But Doris didn't flinch. Security was already on standby. I watched Travis fold his arms and glance toward the parking lot. Good, I thought. Let the boy lead this time. Lisa threw her arms up one last time, her red blouse flaring like a warning flag. She looked toward the glass where she imagined I'd appear. But I didn't, because I was no longer inside her orbit. She mouthed something. Mom. Not a plea, a demand. But I didn't move, didn't wave, didn't rise. I stayed seated, one hand resting lightly on the quilt that covered my lap, the same one Cliff used to lay over my shoulders on chilly nights in our old house. She waited 10 more seconds, then turned and left. The doors closed behind her like punctuation. Gerald arrived an hour later with scones and a soft smile. She came again, he said. I saw. And you stayed calm. I wasn't calm, I said. I was done. We sat in the tea room, the windows wide open to the golden hour light. I poured 2 cups of chamomile. He unfolded the newspaper. I unfolded peace. That night I wrote one line in my journal, when they return with fury, and you no longer flinch. That's how you know the chapter is closed. The next morning a second envelope arrived. Cream, slightly thicker, Lisa again. But this one wasn't dropped in person. It was mailed, stamped, tracked. I opened it in the sunroom beneath the light of the east window. Inside, a letter. A torn check reattached with tape. A note scribbled on the bottom. Maybe we can talk. I miss you. We all do. I didn't need to read more. The check had been forged again in my name. The amount $3,500. Memo car repairs. But it wasn't written by me. It was written for me as if I'd already agreed. She hadn't learned. Because she never believed she needed to. I folded the check into a tight square and placed it in the shredder again. Then I left the envelope open on my writing desk. Empty. Gutted. A perfect metaphor. When Gerald came by that evening, he raised an eyebrow at the envelope. She's still trying, he asked. She still thinks I'm vulnerable, I replied. But I wasn't. Because now I didn't need to prove I was strong. I just needed to stay gone. That night I wrote nothing. Because sometimes the absence of ink says everything. It was a Thursday, late morning. The sun had painted Golden Pines in that soft, buttery light it always wore before noon. Even the koi pond looked like it was holding its breath. I was sitting outside near the courtyard bench, a quilt across my knees, sipping tea that had long since gone cold. Marjorie was next to me, her hands folded neatly in her lap, eyes squinting toward the walking trail like she could see something I couldn't. She always did. They're coming, she said quietly. I didn't ask who. I already knew. Lisa and Travis came walking up the curved brick path side by side, but it was clear even from a distance they weren't together. Lisa's stride was sharp, furious, calculated. Travis trailed a step behind, shoulders hunched, earbuds in, as if this whole confrontation was a tedious detour between gaming sessions. Lisa was dressed for battle. Red blazer, high heels clicking like gunfire, a leather binder clutched to her chest. I wondered what it contained. Old utility bills. My trust paperwork printed from Google. A childhood drawing she thought might guilt me into surrender. But it didn't matter, because she no longer had the key. Doris Golden Pine's quiet protector in a navy cardigan stepped forward as they reached the main entrance. Lisa didn't even slow down. She reached for the glass doors already locked. Doris stepped between them. I couldn't hear the exchange, but I knew the rhythm. Lisa's hands moved like punctuation, sharp jabs raised palms, fingers slicing through air. Doris didn't budge. Her hand hovered gently over her walkie-talkie, not as a threat, just a fact. Lisa turned, gestured toward the back garden, toward me. I didn't move, not out of fear, out of choice. The old me would have gotten up, out of duty, out of hope, out of the hollow ache that says maybe this time they mean it. But that woman, she'd been burned away. One insult, one forged check, one coffee mug at a time. Now I was still, wrapped in a quilt, whole. Marjorie leaned slightly toward me. "Want me to call Gerald?" "No," I said. "Let her see me calm." Lisa spotted me then. Her eyes locked on mine through the glass. I saw the flicker surprise, disbelief, something close to rage. She stepped toward the doors again. Doris stepped in front of her again. A silent standoff. This time Lisa raised her voice. I couldn't hear the words, but I saw the shape of them. "Ruth, mother, please." But I also saw what she didn't know: how to hide panic. Not because she missed me, because she missed access. Behind her, Travis had already turned his back. He was texting. For a moment I felt pity. And then I remembered the blank stare on his face as I dabbed at my burned legs in his kitchen. The smirk when he said, "It's just $5,000, Grandma." That pity gone. Doris raised her hand firmly and pointed toward the parking lot. Lisa hesitated, then turned. And for the first time I saw something I hadn't seen before. Not anger. Not guilt. Resignation. She knew. The locks had changed. Later that afternoon, Gerald arrived with a manila envelope tucked under his arm and a small bouquet of camellias from his yard. She tried the front door. She did. And she left. He sat beside me, letting the envelope rest on the table between us. We didn't speak for a long moment. "Do you think she'll come back?" I finally asked. "Of course," he said. "But not as your daughter." I blinked. "What do you mean she'll come back as a plaintiff? Or a last-ditch manipulator? Or maybe even a rebrander, someone who wants to start fresh? But not as your daughter. That role." She gave it up. The envelope contained the final documents. The house had been officially listed under the trust. Title secure, liens blocked, withdrawal authority restricted. It was, as Gerald put it, a fortress made of dotted lines. And in it there was a letter. A pre-drafted cease and desist. Not to be used now. Just ready. Just in case she starts circulating stories, Gerald said. "She always does," I replied. He slid one more document toward me. A single formal clause. Lisa Andrews, effective immediately, was barred from representing herself as caretaker trustee or beneficiary of the Langley estate or trust in any personal, financial, or legal capacity. She wasn't just blocked, she was erased. At least from the roles she had assigned herself. That evening, I sat by the koi pond as the wind stirred the surface into small silver tremors. I thought about what Lisa might do next. Call a lawyer, start a social media crusade, tell distant relatives I'd lost my mind. I didn't care. Because what she couldn't undo, what no spin could rewrite, was that this time I hadn't vanished. I had sealed the door behind me. 2 days later, I got another letter. Smaller this time. Handwritten return address. Lisa's cursive. Inside a printed photo. An old picture of me holding her as a child. She'd scrawled on the back, "I don't recognize this version of you. Please come back. We need you." There was no "I'm sorry," no acknowledgement of forged checks, no explanation for why my bank accounts had been cleaned out for Uber Eats orders and boutique handbags. Just a photo and a line. "Please come back." I placed the photo face down on the desk. I didn't shred it. Not because it meant something, but because some lies are too well framed to destroy. You just stop looking at them. That Sunday, I helped Marjorie bake lemon squares in the shared kitchen. We laughed when the powdered sugar exploded out of the bag like a snowstorm. My scarf smelled like citrus and cinnamon. My hands ached from stirring, but I felt full. Lisa hadn't taken everything. Not the laughter, not the will, not the core. She'd drained me of money, yes, of trust, definitely, but not of self. That was the miracle. That which remains after the theft is still enough. That night, Gerald and I sat on the patio under a wide navy sky. No stars, just a hush. He poured us both a half glass of wine, red, rich, sharp. "She's quiet," he said. "She's calculating," I replied. "And you?" I smiled. "I'm prepared." He raised his glass. "To locked doors." I raised mine back. "To keys they'll never hold again." And we drank, not in celebration, but in the ceremony. The call came at dawn, not from Lisa, from Gerald. "Are you sitting down?" he asked. I wasn't. I was already standing by the window watching the koi scatter as the gardener swept leaves into a tidy pile. "Go ahead," I said. She forged another check. I closed my eyes. "How much?" 4,000. Labeled care services. Same account. She submitted it using mobile deposit yesterday. My breath stayed even. My voice didn't crack. Did the bank catch it? They did. This time they didn't just flag it. They filed. There was a long pause. Not from hesitation, from relief. What does that mean? It means the Elder Financial Protection Unit has enough to move forward. The investigation is now criminal, and Ruth, they're not just looking at her. Travis's name came up. A gaming account funded by one of the joint cards. Multiple withdrawals traced back to his email. His phone. A breeze stirred the lace curtain beside me. They weren't just reckless. They were predictable. What happens now? They'll want another statement from you. Possibly a deposition. But Ruth, this is already in motion. It's no longer yours to carry alone. I sat down slowly. The chair creaked. Not from age, from memory. "I didn't want this," I said. "I know," Gerald replied. "But you didn't choose this. You survived it." That afternoon, 2 investigators came to Golden Pines. Respectful, soft-spoken. One wore gray slacks and carried a leather portfolio. The other took notes with a fountain pen that clicked every few seconds like a heartbeat of truth. They asked about the timeline, about my awareness, about my willingness. "Did you authorize your daughter to sign your name?" "No." "Did you provide her written access to your accounts?" "No." "Were there conversations where you expressed hesitation or confusion, and she responded with redirection or dismissal?" I didn't answer that one right away, because that wasn't just one moment. That was years, years of being told, "Let me help," years of being asked, "Do you want to handle that at your age?" Years of "Don't worry, I'll take care of it." The condescension wrapped in concern. The erasure wrapped in hugs. "Yes," I said, "more than I can count." They took my journal, photocopied the entries. One investigator paused at the line I wrote the night I left Lisa's house. "They didn't break me. They harvested me. And now the season is over." He looked up. "Would you be willing to testify?" I didn't hesitate. "Yes. Because I wasn't just doing this for me. I was doing it for every woman who's been told she's difficult because she asks for respect." Later that day, Marjorie and I sat near the koi pond again. She had brought banana bread and 2 thermoses of ginger tea. "Bad news?" she asked gently. "No," I said. "Truth. Just loud now." She nodded. "Tends to echo when you stop whispering it." We sat in silence. And then I said something I hadn't said aloud before. "She took everything." Marjorie waited. But not me. A week passed. The investigation deepened. Statements were taken, screenshots submitted, password trails traced. Travis's name now appeared on at least 3 flagged transactions. One was for a gaming console. Another was for a luxury hoodie. $370. The last, a PayPal withdrawal at 3:14 a.m. with the note, "Thanks, Grandma." I stared at the evidence folder Gerald handed me and felt a sting in the back of my throat. Not rage, recognition. That was all I ever was to them. A vault with a face. Lisa's silence lasted longer this time. No calls, no letters, no unannounced visits. But I knew it wouldn't last. Because people like Lisa don't apologize. They recalculate. And when they finally feel the grip of consequence, not fear of it, but the actual taste, they show up. Not with flowers, but with fire. It happened on a Monday. Golden Pines was quiet after lunch. Most of the residents had drifted into the TV room or the craft lounge. I stayed outside pruning a potted mint plant by the bench. That's when Doris's voice came through the intercom. "Mrs. Langley, you have a visitor, Elisa Andrews. Would you like us to allow her inside?" "No," I said calmly. "But you can tell her I'm in the garden." A few minutes later, I saw her silhouette round the back hedge. She looked smaller this time, tired. Like she'd spent the last several days yelling into rooms that didn't answer back. She didn't call out. She just approached. Carefully. Strategically. I didn't rise from the bench. She stood a few feet away, binder in her hands again. Her voice cracked first. "Mom, I didn't know it would go this far." I looked at the pond. "You forged my name, Lisa. I was trying to make things right. I just needed some time, some flexibility." "You weren't answering me, I was protecting myself." Silence. "Then I'm your daughter. That doesn't entitle you to ownership." "I made mistakes." "No. You made choices." I finally looked at her. "And now you have to live with them." Her eyes shimmered. Not tears. Strategy. "We're being investigated. Travis is scared. You should have thought about that before you spent my prescriptions on sneakers. Are you going to let strangers decide what happens to your family?" I stood. Not quickly, not dramatically, just enough to meet her eyes at my full height. "You decided that. The moment you poured scalding coffee on my legs and called me selfish." Her lips parted, but no words came out. So I gave her one more truth. "I will testify, Lisa. I will tell them everything. Because you may have buried me under shame for years, but you didn't kill me. I'm still here. And I remember." She looked like she might collapse, but I didn't catch her. I simply sat back down, turned toward the pond, and let her make the only decision she had left: leave, or be escorted out. She chose the former. This time no screaming, just footsteps retreating over gravel. And that was the final sound of the door locking from my side. That night I sat by the window with Gerald. The documents were complete, the trust was impenetrable, the legal proceedings had begun. And my tea finally was hot when I drank it. "I think it's over," I said softly. Gerald looked at me. "No. It's beginning." He was right. Because I wasn't recovering. I was arriving. Not to a house, not to a courtroom, but to myself. The title transfer was finalized on a Wednesday. I signed it just after breakfast. One signature, two initials, a date in the top corner. Simple. But it didn't feel simple. It felt sacred. Because I wasn't just signing away a property. I was sealing off a past. That house, the one Lisa paraded as hers in every photo, the one Travis used as his backdrop while he live-streamed the one they remodeled without permission and filled with things bought in my name, had never truly been theirs. They changed the curtains, painted the walls, hung up art that meant nothing to me. But the bones were always mine. Now the law recognized that too. By noon, Carla had scheduled a final walkthrough with a new prospective buyer. Lisa wasn't notified. Because she wasn't the owner. Because she never was. She had occupied it, yes. But you can't inherit what you hijacked. You can't keep what was never yours. That same afternoon, the bank froze the last account linked to my original information. 12 flagged withdrawals, 4 forged checks, 3 suspicious authorization calls traced back to Lisa's voice. The financial abuse specialist filed a formal recommendation to press charges. The documents were airtight. The timelines aligned. The story, though bitter, was undeniable. Even if she claimed it was a misunderstanding. Even if she tried to spin it as just helping. Even if she cried. Because tears don't reverse signatures. I sat in the tea room, the window wide, the smell of rosemary and warm bread drifting in from the courtyard. Marjorie poured us each a cup of Earl Grey. She didn't ask how I was. That's why I trusted her. She waited until I finished my first sip before she said, "She's unraveling, isn't she?" I nodded. She came again, this time to the house. Tried to speak with the realtor. Tried to argue her name was still on something. Marjorie raised one brow, and she left when she realized even the mailbox didn't belong to her. That night, I returned to my room and opened a drawer I hadn't touched in months. Inside was a notebook Cliff had once used for garden planning. On the first page, still in his neat block letters, "Plant what grows, cut what doesn't, protect the roots." I turned to a fresh page and began to write. Not about Lisa, not about the money, but about what I had left. A room filled with light, friends who didn't ask for access, an identity untouched by guilt. I wasn't just rebuilding, I was rewriting. 3 days later, Gerald handed me a copy of the official filing, People vs. Lisa Andrews, Travis Andrews. Charges financial exploitation of a vulnerable adult, forgery and identity theft. The paperwork had weight, not just literal, spiritual. I didn't smile. I didn't cry. I just ran my fingers over the embossed seal and whispered, "Finally." Not out of vengeance, out of validation. Lisa tried to call me that evening. Twice. Then she sent a text. "I don't understand how you could do this to your family, too." As if this were my attack. As if her theft had been an act of love. As if removing me from my own life had been caregiving. I didn't respond. Instead, I blocked the number. I didn't owe her an explanation. Because I wasn't the one who crossed the line, I was the one drawing it. The next morning, Lisa showed up at Golden Pines again. She didn't make it past the parking lot. Security recognized her instantly. Doris had updated the visitor list. Banned individuals. High-risk contacts. No exceptions. She stood near the front walk binder in hand, voice shrill as she shouted into her phone. I watched from the upstairs library behind tinted glass. She looked around like someone had stolen her peace. But what she didn't understand, what she never would, was that peace doesn't come from control. It comes from letting go. And she no longer had the grip. Later that day, Carla called me. "We've had 2 offers," she said. "Both serious. One in cash. I wanted to give you the first choice." I exhaled. "Pick the buyer who didn't raise their voice when you gave them the price." Carla laughed. "I already did." The sale closed in 6 days. The funds were deposited directly into the Langley Trust. Lisa never saw a cent. Travis didn't even know it was happening. Their housewarming party pictures from 3 years ago, matching t-shirts, string lights, fake laughter, meant nothing now. Because bricks don't prove ownership, receipts do. Gerald brought me the final paperwork in a navy folder with gold trim. "You're fully liquid now," he said, smiling. "Independent, protected, free." I stared at the folder for a long time before I opened it, and when I did, I felt it, not joy, not relief. Something quieter, like breath returning to lungs, like a door unlocking from the inside. Later that night, I took a walk by the koi pond. The air smelled like mint and memory. The water was still. I sat alone. No calls, no threats, no fire alarms pulled by a desperate daughter. Just quiet. Chosen quiet. I pulled out my notebook and wrote, "They used to own my silence. Now it belongs to me." It ended not with a gavel, but with an envelope. A small ivory one slid discreetly under my door by the receptionist at Golden Pines. Lisa's handwriting again. Not perfect this time. Hesitant, almost childlike. I stared at it for a while. Not out of fear, out of finality. Because by now I knew the game, the rhythm, the bait. The envelope wasn't heavy. No forged check this time. No clipped apology laced with a request. Just a letter, handwritten, 4 pages long. I didn't read them all. Not because I couldn't, because I no longer needed to. The first sentence, "I don't know who you've become." I folded the page without reading the rest. Because that line said everything. I hadn't become someone else. I had simply returned to the woman she buried, under shame, under guilt, under management disguised as help. And now that woman was no longer accessible, not through pity, not through performance, not even through blood. Later that morning, Gerald came by with a warm scone and a smile. "Another letter?" he asked. I handed it to him. He flipped through the pages, skimming without judgment. "She's still hoping for access." "To me?" "To your forgiveness," he said. "But only if it comes with the door unlocked again." I nodded. He didn't need to say more. I tore the letter in half, then in half again, and fed it into the shredder beside the front desk. No anger, no tears, just clarity. A week later, I received confirmation that the charges had moved forward. Lisa was formally indicted on 3 counts: financial exploitation of a dependent adult, forgery of legal documents, identity theft. Travis, now legally an adult, was named as a co-conspirator on 1 charge: misappropriation of funds. The investigator called me personally. "I want to thank you," she said. "Most victims never come forward." I looked out the window at the koi pond glimmering in the sun. "I'm not a victim," I replied. "I'm a record. And sometimes records break the cycle." At Golden Pines, nothing changed. The same tea room, the same quilt, the same quiet shuffle of cards in the bridge lounge. But something in me had changed. I no longer looked over my shoulder. I no longer answered calls from unknown numbers. I no longer hesitated when people asked what happened. Because shame is only powerful when it's silent. And I had spoken, not in screams but in signatures, but in... Gerald and I sat outside on the anniversary of Cliff's passing. He brought yellow tulips, Cliff's favorite. I brought nothing but time. "I think he'd be proud," Gerald said, handing me a cup of hot chamomile. "Of what?" I asked. "That you stayed kind, even when you had every reason not to." I looked down at my hands, the same hands Lisa once held when she was a little girl afraid of the dark. I'd been afraid too, afraid that saying no meant losing love. But now I knew. Love that vanishes when you say no was never love at all. The last piece fell into place quietly, a full restitution order. Lisa was to repay what she had taken. The court assigned her a timeline, an account manager, and a legal boundary that prevented her from contacting me again without approval. I didn't request jail time, not out of mercy, out of indifference. Because punishment isn't always a sentence. Sometimes it's a locked door, and the sound of your name slipping out of reach. I was sipping tea one afternoon when Doris brought in a new resident. Her name was Irene, late 60s, recently widowed, moved in after a falling out with her only daughter. She sat across from me in the garden one morning and said, "I feel guilty for being here, like I should have stayed quiet, been more agreeable." I handed her my extra quilt and said, "Don't confuse sacrifice with purpose. They'll never thank you for giving too much. Only punish you when you stop." She looked at me like I had read a sentence from her journal. And maybe I had. Because stories like mine, they don't belong to just one woman. They belong to generations. Golden Pines held a community garden event that spring. We planted lavender, thyme, and baby marigolds. I was in charge of the herb boxes. Travis used to call me the plant lady. Now he'd need permission to use my name for anything, even as a joke, and he wouldn't get it. One afternoon while pruning mint, a younger woman from the staff asked, "Do you miss them?" I didn't have to ask who she meant. "Yes," I said, "but not the people they became. I miss the versions of them that never existed." She looked confused. I just smiled. Grief is rarely clean. Sometimes you grieve who they never were more than who they were. I still keep the notebook. But it's not about Lisa anymore. It's about me. About what I like, what I eat, what I want to remember. I write down recipes, books I want to read again, small gratitudes. Today's entry. The tea was hot. The silence was mine. And nobody asked for my wallet. If you're listening to this in your car, or while folding laundry, or staring at your ceiling in the dark. I want you to know you are not selfish for saying no. You are not cruel for choosing peace. You are not wrong for refusing to fund someone else's comfort at the cost of your own. Some relationships are blood, some are bruises, and some are both. But the truth is that boundaries aren't walls. They are doors with locks that only you control. And if someone throws coffee in your lap when you refuse to be used, you leave the mug shattered. And you keep walking, because kindness without consent is not love, it's labor. And you, my dear, are not a servant in your own story. So wherever you are, if you've given too much, if you've been called ungrateful for needing rest, if you've been told you owe someone everything just because they share your name, let me offer this. You don't. You owe yourself safety. You owe yourself softness. You owe yourself the dignity of being more than useful. And if this story stirred something you've buried deep, something you've never told a soul, maybe tonight is the night you finally breathe easier. I did. And I'm still here. Share your story in the comments. You never know who needs to hear it. If this touched your heart, tap like. And if you believe in quiet power, subscribe to Shadowed Revenge, where the loudest victories are told in whispers. When you're ready, watch the next story on screen. It's not the ending, it's your beginning. Thank you for listening. And wherever you are tonight, be safe, be seen, and walk forward with truth.